The media fixates on kinetic exchange. Reports detail how Zelensky seeks air defense support as Russia weaponizes the cold. The British Army offers drone degrees to train a new generation for visible conflict. This is the theater of 20th century warfare, presented for public consumption. It is a calculated misdirection. The core assumption that the next protocol of war will be loud is a fatal liability. The primary vector of 21st century asymmetric warfare is not kinetic. It is silent. Per RUSI threat models, the true theater of operations is not the sky, but the deep ocean floor and low Earth orbit. The targets are not cities. They are the fiber optic submarine cables and satellite constellations that function as the central nervous system of global finance. Severing these nodes is not an act of war. It is an act of systemic erasure. It triggers an immediate, irreversible solvency crisis. A currency plunge is a minor tremor. This is the tectonic event. We are not discussing an attack. We are discussing the instantaneous deletion of the global financial ledger. A mathematical certainty. This is the weaponization of silence. This protocol is designed to create the blind Leviathan, a nation-state with $1 trillion military rendered inert. Its launch codes cannot be transmitted. Its satellites cannot see. Its fleets cannot coordinate. It is a superpower with zero informational leverage, facing total infrastructure collapse. This is the new blueprint for forcing a conventionally superior power into a binary choice, bankruptcy or escalation. The motive is not conquest. It is a mathematical response to systemic weakness. A conventional kinetic war is a direct vector to national bankruptcy. According to analysis from authorities like CSIS, the staggering cost and political toxicity of an unpopular war create a domestic liability that modern states can no longer sustain. This framework reframes the conflict in Ukraine not as a war of territory, but as an induced solvency crisis. Initial conventional failures forced a pivot. When a state's ability to project power through expensive, traditional means is exhausted, its strategy must shift from battlefield victory to imposing maximum economic pain at minimum cost. This is the core of the asymmetric protocol. We see the blueprint in action as Russia plunges Kiev into cold by targeting its foundational infrastructure. Each strike is not a military objective in the classic sense. It is a direct attack on Ukraine's balance sheet, designed to make the basic functioning of the state an unsolvable economic equation. The response from competing powers validates this thesis. The British Army's new drone degree is not for training pilots. It's for training accountants of attrition. This isn't about dogfighting. It's about learning the most efficient, low-cost vectors to dismantle a nation's economic viability, forcing it toward that final point of leverage, the nuclear threat. The kinetic cost exchange ratio has been broken. According to analysts at RUSI, the operative math is now a $5 million tank versus a $500 drone. This is not a battlefield evolution. It is a systemic economic attack vector. The industrial-era model of warfare is now a crippling liability. State actors are institutionalizing this protocol. The British Army's new drone degree, as reported by MSN, is not an academic exercise. It is the formalization of low-cost, attritional warfare as state doctrine. They are mass-producing the architects of the next solvency crisis. This is the democratization of violence. The capacity to neutralize billions in capital infrastructure is no longer the exclusive domain of superpower arsenals. It has been outsourced to the consumer electronics market. A state cannot sustain the economic burden of defending $100 million power stations from thousands of disposable threats, a blueprint we see being executed against Ukrainian infrastructure. The objective is not military victory. It is to inflict a national-scale, systemic liability, to bleed a nation's treasury, forcing a choice between sovereign default and total collapse. The protocol for systemic economic collapse is not being designed in Washington or Beijing. It is being perfected in the gray zones. These regions, dismissed by legacy media as case studies in local instability, are in fact proxy laboratories. They are live fire environments for testing the precise blend of asymmetric pressure required to trigger a national solvency crisis. The blueprint is now operational. In Ukraine, Russia is not waging a conventional war of attrition. It is executing an economic kill chain. Low-cost kinetic assets are systematically targeting high-value infrastructure, plunging cities into cold and darkness. Per reports from the Moscow Times, the objective is to make the cost of survival, the cost of simple heating and electricity, fiscally unsustainable. It is a direct attack on the state's balance sheet. This kinetic vector is paired with financial warfare. The engineered plunge of a state's currency, as documented by dev discourse regarding the rupee, is not a market fluctuation. It is a targeted weapon. It renders a nation unable to afford critical imports, service its debt, or fund its military. This is how you force a state toward a launch-on-warning posture, where its nuclear arsenal becomes its final line of credit against bankruptcy. While you were watching distractions, the West validated the model. The British Army is now institutionalizing this exact protocol, offering drone degrees to train a new generation in low-cost, asymmetric asset deployment. This is not a defensive reaction, it is an adoption of the new meta. The gray zones have proven the thesis. State collapse is now a mathematical formula, and the barrier between a solvency crisis and nuclear exchange is the next variable being solved for. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a relic of the Cold War. It is the central vulnerability of the 21st century. The protocol is a mathematical trap. Upon detection of an inbound strategic missile strike, a nation must launch its own retaliatory strike before the incoming warheads detonate. The decision window is not days or hours. It is minutes. Now, inject asymmetric warfare into this equation. A hostile actor does not need to build a single missile. They only need to blind you. According to analysts at CSIS, state-level cyber attacks can now spoof, disable, or completely sever the signals from early warning radar arrays and satellite networks. This creates the fog of digital war. The commander is now in an information solvency crisis. Is the blackout a technical glitch, or is it the deliberate blinding that precedes a decapitation strike? The protocol forces a zero-sum decision. Waiting to regain sight guarantees total destruction if the attack is real. Launching on the assumption of attack is the only remaining leverage against annihilation. RUSI reports confirm that this digital fragility is the new front line. The kinetic cost of launching is now weighed against the certainty of oblivion through inaction. Fear, amplified by data deprivation, becomes the trigger. The system is engineered to default to escalation. The barrier between a cyber attack and a nuclear exchange is no longer a firewall. It's a panicked human judgment call. The protocol has been battle-tested. The systemic attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure are not random acts of terror. They are a public demonstration of a new economic warfare doctrine. Achieve systemic collapse by targeting non-military critical assets. While legacy media focuses on kinetic exchanges, the real blueprint is the engineered energy scarcity plunging Kyiv into cold, as documented by the Moscow Times. The kinetic cost for executing this protocol is now approaching zero. The British Army's public pivot to a drone degree is not an educational initiative. It is a market signal. It confirms the mass proliferation of low-cost, high-leverage, unmanned systems. The barrier to entry for threatening a nation's core infrastructure has been effectively erased. This weaponization of logistics directly targets economic solvency. A minor disruption has a cascading impact on currency stability, imports, and exports, as evidenced by the rupee's recent plunge. The objective is not military victory. It is to force a solvency crisis. The ultimate checkmate is forcing a nation to choose between bankruptcy and deploying its final strategic deterrent. The calibration shot will occur within the next 12 months. CSIS analysts project a high-probability strike on a G7 nation's primary shipping terminal. The vector will be a coordinated cyber and low-altitude drone swarm attack targeting the port's automated container management system. The objective is a 72-hour attribution-impossible logistical blackout, triggering a systemic shock to the supply chain and testing the target's liquidity under pressure without crossing a conventional tripwire. It will be reported as a catastrophic system glitch.